Hello, good evening everybody, and welcome to Arlene Cardiff and this set of 3 sessions of teachings on liberating the emotions. So this is looking at the colour and element system tantric of Vajrayana psychology. I'm Ngakpa ö-Dzin and this is Ngakpa ö-Dzin. And Ngakpa ö-Dzin is going to be the primary teacher for these sessions, and I will be support. So if you have a question, please do the raise your hand thing on the Zoom, or put something in the chat box rather than going on to speaker, because we find that works better. And we've also got more than one screen's worth of people, I think, so it's a bit difficult for us to see if you come, if you're talking or if you're waving at us. So if you could use the raise hand thing or put a question in the chat box, and then when there appears to be a moment, then I will put the questions to Ngakpa ö-Dzin, and hopefully we will answer them okay. So thank you very much for joining us, and I will pass you over.
Thank you very much indeed. Good evening, everyone. These teachings are for anyone who has emotions and for anyone who has an interest in Buddhism. So if that describes you in any way, then you've come to the right place. When I was looking at these teachings, it occurred to me that there's a sort of scientific aspect to Buddhism, in that it presents theories, but also it presents methods and practices. And through following the methods and practices that go with the theories, you can come to prove to yourself the theories and prove to yourself the efficacy of the teachings. And I think that's quite valuable, and perhaps something to bear in mind as we go through the teachings. If you're thinking, well, how do I find out if this is true? How do I find out if it's relevant to me, if it works for me? So there will be a presentation here of both theory and practice, and give you a chance to look at that. One of the primary teachings on Buddhism, in Buddhism, is the sense of dissatisfaction and the sense of going round in circles in repeated patterns of thought or action or emotion that never seem to come to any resolution, that are in some ways unsatisfactory. And this can even include being successful and finding that perhaps even success is not what we expected, doesn't have the sense of satisfaction that we thought would be there at the end of a particular piece of work or end of a particular activity. So given that this is a fairly common experience, this is where we start. This is what's called samsara, or korwa in Tibetan, which has a literal meaning of going round in circles, because we tend to think that a particular pattern of approach to life is one day going to work, even if in the past it has failed us in some way. So we give it another go, maybe a slightly different angle, and see how that works, or not, as the case may be. So this is one of the original teachings, one of the early teachings of Buddhism, is that there is this sense of dissatisfaction. But interestingly, the other aspect of the teachings is that liberation is always possible. So however we find ourselves, whatever condition of thought or emotion we may have, there is a path to liberation for everybody, however it may feel. And this I find supremely optimistic, but also it's a provable aspect of Buddhist practice. So if we practice, we find out that this is actually a possibility. And when we come to talking about emotions, there will be a way of approaching them that enables us to unravel the whatever emotional condition we found ourselves in. Now, because most of us will have been raised in a Judeo-Christian background, whether we know it, whether we're aware of it or not, it's probably sitting there somewhere in the background. We may have the idea of the possibility of original sin and eternal damnation. And these simply don't exist as concepts in Buddhism. Instead, in terms of Buddhism, we have original complete lack of sin, and the fact that wherever we find ourselves, the situation is workable. There's nothing is eternal in terms of whatever emotional wrangling we may currently be going through. Where different schools of Buddhism might have a different angle on that is how long the process of unraveling might take. So you can find that some schools of Buddhism will talk in terms of things taking several lifetimes, some that it could happen in this lifetime, and some that it's already there if we could only just notice it. So liberation is present in all schools of Buddhism. They might have some different idea of the methods and a different idea of the time scale, how long it might take. From our perspective, from the perspective of the Aratea lineage, we're a Dzogchen lineage. So the view of Dzogchen is one of the possibility of instantaneous liberation in the moment. So that's always there as an ever-present possibility for us. In order to make use of these teachings, it's helpful to follow a path of practice, because we follow a path that is explained by our teachers, but it's a path that has been followed successfully by many people over hundreds, possibly thousands of years. It's been tried and tested, and we get the chance to try and test it also. So the good news is that liberation is always possible. The bad news maybe is that we have to do it ourselves. There isn't the idea that, there's neither the idea that we have to have faith, nor is there the idea that salvation or whatever comes from outside. So it's very, very much the path of the worker, the path of somebody who gets on with it and actually practices. There isn't going to be anything magical happening. We just get on and practice. And then we can prove these teachings through our own experience, through practice. Are there any questions at this point?
No, not at the moment.
Right. So that's all either very clear or makes no sense at all. So when we look at our emotions, it's quite interesting to look at what they are and how they function and what they're trying to do for us. I think we'd all very much like to feel real. We'd all like to feel that we're really here and there's a sense of me being here, doing whatever I'm doing. And we find from time to time that this sense of me can be undermined, and that this will spark some kind of emotional reaction. So this is something for each person to look at. If we have a difficult emotional reaction to circumstances, what is happening there in terms of how I am and what I feel about a particular situation? As I say, we want to feel real. We want to feel that we really exist, and sometimes circumstances don't seem to support this, and something disappointing or difficult happens. Now, from when I first came across the idea of emotions, I thought there were things that were irrelevant to practice and things you had to get rid of. That the way emotions got in the way of having a sort of smooth and easy life was that the problem was in the emotion and we had to squish it somehow. But this is just a sort of surface reaction and misses out on all kinds of other possibilities. So, as I say, we want to feel real, but we have a definition of what that is. What is my definition of something that is real? And this is where we get to, I think, the interesting nub of the matter, because we have these 5 words that something real is solid, separate, permanent, continuous, and defined. And so something solid, I can kick it. Something permanent, it just lasts. Something separate, I'm here, it's over there. Something continuous, it has no end. And defined, we can actually say, this is exactly this. And this is our definition of existence. This is our definition of what we call form. Now, what is really interesting, once we've defined this idea of existence and reality, is that we look very carefully at each of these things, we'll find something slightly odd about them. Something that is solid, permanent, separate, continuous, and defined is something which is unchanging. It's entirely reliable, like we have this table here. We always have a table. That will come in handy later.
There's always tables in Buddhism.
There's always a table. Got to keep your stuff on it. And it's unchanging. So it seems. And then we apply that to ourselves and our circumstances. And then we can see that something that is unchanging, something that is always separate, something that always maintains the same definition, is empty of existence. Empty in the sense that in order for things to exist, we have to be able to interact with them. So something that is unchanging, we can't interact with them. If we were unchanging, if we never changed as beings, this moment, we'd be stuck in it forever. So it's only through change that we can exist. And so our definition of existence is one based on unchangingness, but existence requires that there be change, that there be interaction. If I was just over here and you were over there, and there was never any interaction, this particular event wouldn't be happening either. So every aspect that we use to define form is actually an aspect of emptiness. And this is where we get to the nub of our predicament, shall we say, if we define our existence in that way, because with every form that arises, emptiness comes with it. So lack of solidity, impermanence, non-separateness, discontinuity and lack of definition are there as well. And in order for things to exist, they have to exist in both ways. So we have form words that define emptiness, and emptiness words that define our form. And so the idea is there that there's no actual division between form and emptiness. Form and emptiness are non-dual. Reality is both.
Could you say a little bit more about why it's emptiness words that define form and form words that define emptiness? Because that sounds like a contradiction.
It is a contradiction. It's a contradiction because of our particular approach to the world, to ourselves. That it's also, in some ways, a proof in itself of non-duality, because everything we think defines our form is empty in the sense of being unable to interact with anything. So these words that we use to define form describe emptiness perfectly, that emptiness is solid, permanent, separate, continuous, and defined. My emptiness is exactly the same as your emptiness. There's no difference between them. So it's entirely contradictory in terms of our dualistic view of the world, and is entirely consistent with non-duality. And we can't escape from that. And we can find ourselves in a predicament in terms of form and emptiness, because we are holding rigidly to a definition of what form is, and reality doesn't conform to that definition.
We have a question.
Yes.
If this is so, Nikkei, if I unmute you for a moment, or I think you can unmute yourself.
Hi. Yes. I have a question. This is sort of poking at the logic in maybe a way that is unproductive, but let's see. So Oh, is there a little, can you hear me?
Yeah, you're a bit quiet, so if you could shout a little bit more.
How about this?
We
Is this
can't
better?
hear you.
This a bit better?
Yeah.
Okay, so the one thought was in terms of like that, the sort of argument that form has to be unchanged. Like if you kind of take these definitions, form has to be unchanging, and that stops the possibility of interaction, because that would lead to changing happening. And the thing you kind of want to do is sort of say, well, yeah, there's a bit that's changing, but there's also a bit that's constant. That's sort of like the essence of the thing, and that never really changes. And that's the thing I rely on. And maybe something else is changing, and that's sort of a way around sort of saying, like, I can have something that is both sort of defined and also interacts with the world. And I'm presuming the problem will then come between, well, where exactly is this division between the thing that's not changing and the thing that can change, and what is that? Is that even, well, and then investigating an experience, is there actually such a thing? If that makes sense.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think in Buddhist terms, there's no way around the idea that there isn't an unchanging entity to be found anywhere, and we'll come on to that in a little bit. That things continue for a period of time, and then they become discontinuous, just in time to surprise us quite often. And that basically the thread of our lives consists of interwoven pieces of discontinuity, that it's almost as if our lives and everything in it are, you could consider something like a piece of sheep's wool, just a single strand, which can't be much longer than, depends on the sheep. But you can make a spool of wool that's hundreds of yards long. But as you came down that spool of wool, some things would cease and some things would start again. And there's enough going on there in terms of things stopping and starting that we have this illusion almost that there's got to be something that continues forever, something that's always present and always continuing. But in reality, everything is stopping and starting, possibly unpredictably. And we can look at that in a bit in terms of how we look at the world and how we approach the ideas of form and emptiness, and how we can come to terms with the fact that perhaps we're seeing the world in a way in which it doesn't exist. I think this is actually the part I found most surprising on the subject of the emotions, was that they weren't things to get rid of. And it's just simply, I say simply, our view of what they are and what's going on that might be the cause of difficulty or upset in terms of our emotional life. So we have different ways of approaching the idea of trying to see that form and emptiness are non-dual, because we're very familiar with form. So it's worth looking at emptiness of the things that we think of as form, because the form will always be there. And if we can show that they're empty also, then we can maybe wander back between those two realities. And even if that doesn't become something that we immediately realize, it is something that we can understand, and perhaps over time it becomes something that imbues the way we are. So there are a number of approaches to looking at form and emptiness. And I think we'll begin with the one I was first introduced to, which was analysis, because we came to Buddhism through a school that had quite a monastic and analytical bias. There were always teachings about analyzing form, so that you could discover emptiness.
There is another question.
Oh yes, certainly.
Okay. This is from Peter. Is there a particular reason why we get stuck into our dualistic view?
I've been thinking about this, and I think the why questions, why are we like this, are difficult and possibly impossible to answer.
We have a 4-year-old grandchild.
Yes.
And almost every other word is why.
And there probably comes a point at which why runs out. And we have to look more at what and how. If we can see in any sense that our view of reality is slightly off balance, then we engage with teachings and practices that help us to see things as they are. And it takes me back in some ways to the teaching about that Buddha Shakyamuni was supposed to have given about the person who'd been shot with an arrow. And the first thing to do is not to say, why was I shot with the arrow? Where did it come from? It's a very interesting looking arrow. I like the feathers at the top and all of that sort of thing. Get the thing out. And then we can possibly, maybe, answer the question why. But it's certainly beyond me to really hazard a guess as to why we are generally as we are. Sometimes it feels as if when you're quite capable of riding a bicycle, but then all of a sudden you're riding that bicycle over a narrow bridge or something, and then nervousness happens, and then you fall in the water or whatever it might be, because all of a sudden confidence in doing what you're doing has been lost. So some teachers have described our condition in that way, that realization is there if we could only see it, but somehow we've lost confidence in it. But even that doesn't answer your question, because we say, well, if we've got this perfect view of reality and our interaction with reality is perfect, why do we give that up? I have no idea. So this is a very, very long-winded way of saying, really, I have no idea of the answer to questions about why we are the way we are.
So there's another question that sort of ties into this, from Steve Lawler. Can you define the dualistic state, please?
Yeah, well, I can try. The dualistic state is one that sees a comfort in form and finds and seeks to prove the existence of me as part of that, and finds itself undermined when, through the filter of our attempts to make form out of everything, non-duality sparkles through, and we perceive emptiness. So our dualistic state for most people is the way we normally find ourselves. And so we, given this as the Buddhist theory, we have a chance to explore that and to try and see what reality is like. So we start from that position. We start from being dualized beings. We receive some kind of indication that maybe reality doesn't operate quite as advertised. And then we engage in the exploration. So yes, this is how we are. So if we find our sense of being and comfort in the unchanging things of our lives and the unchanging things of the world, and the things that we can relate to, the things that act as reference points, I'm here, that's there, I feel a sense of reality. I own this, I like that. This makes me feel like a real person because I have a nice fixed set of things, of likes and dislikes. Then we're dualized. Then we have a dualistic mindset. And these teachings really set out to take that apart. So to some extent, we have to be prepared for a bit of a shock. And it may continue being a bit of a shock for a while. So if we start from the wonderful Ngakpa teachings, and I think they must have all been carpenters or something, because it's always a table that we talk about. I was going to say something about table legs. This one doesn't really have legs, but still manages to be a table. That one has legs. And when we speak of a table, we have an idea of this thing, and there it is, and it sort of stands so high, and you can put things on it, and it's quite a reliable thing. But then the analysts will say, well, where's the table? And you sort of point vaguely at it, and there it is. Okay, there's a table. No, but where's the table? Where's the table-ness of the table? And you go, what? And then the question arises, well, is the table the top? Not really, that's a flat piece of wood. Is the table the legs? Well, not really, they're other squarish pieces of wood. And this could take some time. You look at that and you try and find where the table is. And this goes back to the previous question about finding an unchanging entity. And the Madhyamikas go into this and say, no, you're not going to find one of those either. So you can't find something in there that is always table. It's not anywhere. And so this is where you can say, look something up in the IKEA catalogue. IKEA are doing click and collect. So you look up this thing, you have this table in the catalogue, you click on it, you go to collect it. Do they give you a table? No, they don't give you a table. They give you a cardboard box. And you think, where's my table? Like there it was in the picture. What I've got now is a cardboard box, and they're usually heavy and slippery and difficult to maneuver. And then you get it home, and magically, as if IKEA are in league with the Ngakpa school, you can create, out of things that aren't a table, you can create a table. There's some sort of magic going on there. But if you go back to it, you still can't find the table. And these things go back and forth down to the minutest particle, and you can analyze things and find that what you're looking for cannot be found. But the great thing is, it's also there. So we can't find the tableness of the table, but we can find things that we call table that work for us. And there it is, for a period of time, until it gets burnt or something else happens to it. So we can go back and forth with anything you like, including oneself. So we can analyze ourselves. I have a name, I'm called ö-Dzin, and I have this sense that there's always been this thread of a me throughout my life. But if I look for that me, can I say that the me that I experience now is the same me that I experienced when I was 5 years old? I've changed, hopefully, entirely over that period of time. And as an aside, this is where emptiness comes to the rescue, because if everything was form, I'd still be at that point in time. But because things can change, because there is emptiness, it makes sense of practice, it makes sense of change, it makes sense of being able to do something with our lives. So if I look at it, if I look at me, if I look at this me project that I'm so fond of, I can't find a self-existent me anywhere. And that's one of the things that can be quite troubling to us, because a lot of these things like table, car, me, camera, whatever, we don't look at them in that way, and we have suppositions about them. And then we find, to our shock and horror, that something's changed. I dropped it on the floor and it broke, or whatever. And so we find that emptiness and form cohabit. There's always that possibility. If we can look at our relationship with an object, or our relationship with something that we remember from childhood. Apparently, I used to like Jaffa cakes and, or what was it? Angel Delight. I think I'd find them quite disgusting now. So that was a reality at that time. Something has changed. Those particular food items may not have changed at all in terms of their chemical construction, but the relationship with them has changed. So the relationship has come to an end. It is now empty completely. I don't buy them, don't go looking for them. So that has evaporated. So we find emptiness and change everywhere, mixed in with the form of our lives. So this is one aspect of looking at and trying, well, maybe finding a hint of emptiness that perhaps we can go back to, even though we can see there's a form there. And I think this takes quite a while if we're going to carry these things out purely by analysis. And I think monastics probably have time to do that and get some serious results out of it. Another approach is through personal experience. And I think the analytical approach will develop personal experience over time, but we don't have to go looking for it, because we'll find that we have that anyway. Is there another question?
Yes, yeah. There is. This is from Steve again. So the table as it appears is the form aspect of the table, and the inability to find the table in its parts is its emptiness.
Yes, I think that's a good way of looking at it. And we can wander back and forth in terms of having our reliable table present, but also knowing that if we went looking for it, we wouldn't be able to find anything that is permanently table. If there was something that was permanently table. Well, IKEA would sell one, hopefully. But we know that somewhere along the line, the table is going to cease to be a table. Our relationship with the table is going to change. All sorts of things like that happen. So it's not simply not being able to find tableness. It's being able to watch our relationship with an object change over time as well. And so the relationship is form, and then the dissolution of the relationship is emptiness. And those two go together as well, because nothing is entirely permanent. But I very much like the experiential approach, and everybody can find something in terms of their own experience that not only expresses emptiness and form, but expresses possibly emotional discomfort at the discovery that there was emptiness there all along, really. If we look at self-definition, I know of people whose self-definition was person who goes to work. I think my father was one of these people, took early retirement and then got a job because they were really defined as person who goes to work, and other definitions didn't seem to be so attractive to them, because if you cease to be person who goes to work, you have to change. Absolutely. You have to be person who's at home. So you have to let that go. If you consider any kind of self-definition, and touched up briefly on likes and dislikes, we can find a certain amount of certainty in liking something, and the way that that reflects to us our existence. I'm this person who likes whatever it is. That's a definition. So that's one of the aspects of form, is definition. I am defined as person who likes whatever. And if we start to feel that that liking is not as much as it once was, I don't know about you, but there can be a tendency to want to get that liking back because it was such a strong definition, and we don't know what there's going to be if we let go of that. Do I actually exist if I cease to, I don't know, enjoy football or particular kinds of music or whatever it is? If that's been the source of my sense of self-definition, what happens then? The situation is open. Do I like an open situation? I've had a definition of myself as technical problem solver. I mean, it was a career for 30 years. And that was certainly my definition at work. It's what I wanted to do. I enjoyed helping people fix their computer problems and work around them. And it's interesting to look at how strong a definition that was, not only over time, but in particular circumstances. If I have a definition of technical problem solver, is that a challenge to me if I can't fix the problem? Or if somebody else fixes the problem, that's even worse. I have a definition, I'm the one who solves the problem, somebody else solved it. So my definition is a bit loose there. But it gets even worse in many ways, because what if I solve the problem? While I'm working on the problem, I am technical support man. And I have a definition, and everyone's looking at me. Oh, he's technical support man. He's solving the problem. As soon as the problem is solved, what am I? The problem's gone. a moment of success, but I'm no longer technical support man. That's gone, because I'm only technical support man if I've got a problem. If I haven't got a problem, I'm not that person. I was once terribly disappointed. I'd set myself...
Only once.
Sorry?
Only once.
Only once. No, probably more than once. But this is the once that was relevant to this this thread. I was once terribly disappointed because I'd set aside, I think a week to work on a problem at work. And it was there and it was all knotty and I knew how I was going to approach it. And it was going to take me a week and clear the desk, everyone stay away. Had it done in 3 minutes. And instead of a sense of triumph over this wild success, there was really a sinking sense of disappointment. This was supposed to be hard and knotty and gritty, and it was going to take all this time, and it was gone. And so my particular sense of definition at that point in time, that idea that of me holding the form of the person who was going to spend a week solving this problem, just went.
There's a question.
There's a question. Yes. Yeah.
Nick Hay would like to ask another question.
I have another question. Hopefully Nora will not interrupt too much.
For some reason, our speakers aren't working. I can't get them to switch on. So,
can you hear me like this?
Yeah.
Rinpoche in I think, well, it's various places, but I think Spectrum of Ecstasy. So has this mentioned that we're trying to, we want to prove ourselves as being real. Is this what you're talking about here? This idea of trying to find a self-definition? Is that what he's trying to there? And the sort of aspect, it's not even just like.
Sorry, I was looking at you over there. Yes, it's.
And the social aspect to it too. Like it's not just what I'm defining myself as, but what other people are expecting me to be, and like everything.
That's all in there too, because sometimes people define you as you'd like to be defined, and sometimes people will define you in different ways. And so these two play, and some you can feel really attracted towards that definition, and some you think, well, that's a bit odd. Am I that sort of person? It's the idea, though, is why do we want to define ourselves at all? And it comes because we have some suspicion of lack of definition, where we have an innate suspicion that we're not entirely real, and experiences actually tend to bear that out. But it's uncomfortable. Being open in a situation can be uncomfortable unless we can actually be there on the spot and completely open. If there's any sense in which I'd rather be defined, then the openness of a situation is going to be challenging. And that includes all sorts of things, even getting rid of some kind of difficulty, or in my case, technical support problem, or whatever it might be. We can cling to our difficulties because without them, we can feel a lack of definition. So there's something going on for us where we can, where we cling to definition because we suspect it actually doesn't hang together. And Buddhist theory and practice is there to say, yep, you're right, it doesn't hang together. And that if we practice, we can actually see that and make sense of our analysis, we can make sense of our own experience and start to discover spaciousness within ourselves. And this actually very neatly takes me on to the last aspect of looking at form and emptiness. I know we haven't looked at, got around to emotions at all, but it's actually, this particular teaching is more laying the groundwork of why we might want to. And so we'll come on to emotions as such in the next teaching. But having had the possibility of looking at things analytically and the ever-present possibility of life surprising us with what it does, I think this is one of the great things about being out there in the world, being family people, being people who go to work, is that life's a bit random. And so we find who we are and how we are because of the way life is. We can't predict it, we can't calm it down, and so always we are faced with how we are. And this can actually be, in some ways, quite encouraging, because if we've practiced or if we've learned something and we find ourselves in a situation which used to make us angry, agitated, whatever it might be, and we find we're not, then you can see that our wonderful friend emptiness has come into play. We have changed. And through our practice, through what we've understood, we're actually different. We're a different person. Life still goes on doing its random thing, but we're different people in that moment. And the way that we bring a sense of spaciousness in our lives is through meditation practice. I remember reading a talk by Trungpa Rinpoche. It was actually about art. And he was saying that an artist needs to meditate, and then he added, we had to get that in there somewhere. And with anything to do with Buddhist practice, we have to get this in there somewhere. That we practice, and in this tradition, it's silent sitting meditation. And within silent sitting meditation, we're very much finding out how we are, because to begin with, we are sitting, and the name of this kind of meditation is Shine, which means remaining uninvolved or remaining undisturbed. And we're remaining uninvolved or undisturbed by the content of mind. So when thoughts arise, we let them go. And it's an interesting way to find out that letting go of thought is not necessarily as easy as we thought it was going to be. That there's a tendency to pick up a thought and run with it and create stories and have all sorts of things going on until we realize, oh, I'm supposed to be letting go of thought. And that period of time could be who knows how long. So because we discover through that practice that we're not necessarily letting go of thought very easily, we can understand thought is one of the, there's a very subtle aspect of self-definition. We're holding on to that thought as a piece of form that helps to define us. But through the practice, if we persevere with it, then we find that gaps appear, and it's possible to be present, but not thinking. We can be both present in terms of form, but empty in terms of the content of mind. And this takes an indeterminate amount of time. It's impossible to say. It could happen in one session. It could happen after a few decades of practice. It's impossible to say. And this is why Buddhism is the religion of the working person, because we have to put the work in. So we understand the theories, we have some practices, and we give them a go and see what happens. So any spaciousness that we can discover through meditation practice isn't just there when we're sitting on the cushion. We take it with us. And because of the randomness of life, we find we are changing. And that with any circumstance, the spaciousness that we've managed to discover within our practice is there as well. So, and also a sense of awareness. So when I'm happily defining myself as technical support man, I also have a bit of a sort of sense of humor around that.
Do you have a cape?
I should have a cape, like it's bicycle repairman. But so you have a sense of spaciousness around your definition, because you know it's there for a period of time. This is who I am, this is what I'm doing, and that at some point it's going to evaporate. So, and that's true with all circumstances. So you drop your computer on the floor and it shatters. How you are with that now might be different to how you were the last time you did it. Hopefully. And so the circumstances are unpredictable. The way in which form plays with emptiness is unpredictable. And so this all serves to give us an insight into how we are as people, how we are as practitioners. I think there was one other thing that came to mind, going back to the question of liberation from the continuous round of existence. The difference between us and somebody who has attained that liberation is time and practice. That people aren't special in the sense that some people are born with a different set of spiritual organs to the rest of us. Human beings are human beings. If somebody practices and gains that realization, that's what we can all do. So the difference between us and realization is time and practice. And the difference between a practitioner and realization is time. So it's all there to be done. It's all there to be realized if we practice.
Ngakpa Kundral has just joined us. I think you've got your time wrong, Ngakpa Kundral, because we're just finishing. You need to be an hour. Sorry, I'm looking at the wrong place. It's an hour earlier. I think you've made the time distance between the US and UK wrong. We start at 6 UK time. So, but it has been recorded,
yes.
And I will put the recording up on the Araling Cardiff YouTube channel, so you'll be able to catch it there. So thank you very much.
Okay, yes.
We've come to the end of the first of these 3 sessions. The next one is in 2 weeks' time. Do you know the date offhand?
It's going to be the 15th, I imagine.
The 15th.
Yes.
Oh, happy St. David's
Yes,
Day.
yes. Equal Derry happy.
Yeah. And as I say, thank you very much for joining us. And if any questions come up, you can always address those in the next session. You can always email arrowlingcardiff@gmail.com. And we look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good night.